So here we are. Mark chapter 6. So much I could say about this, and I am so familiar with this. It's the one time in every 3 years where I come to a chapter in the scriptures that I think I can do this on my ear. Because the simple reason was, for about 2 years, in over 200 churches in Churches of Christ, when I was responsible for the community services of Churches of Christ, I went round and I used this passage as my common passage that I preached about. So I can exegete this perfectly, but I'm not going to today. I want us to actually do a different form of interacting with the scriptures. And the way I want to do that is just simply by talking about this, slipping a verse, and then perhaps talking about some current situations that we find ourselves in. Because we live in a real world with real pains, with real difficulties, with real joys, with real sadnesses. We are not living here 2,000 years ago, but people like in the days of Jesus are just as seeking, just as hungry as they were back then. People today are lost. People, as it says in the scriptures, when Jesus looked upon them, they are sheep without a shepherd. It's an analogy that we perhaps don't understand in its fullness because we are mainly urban dwellers, but certainly we can understand the sentiment. And as I look out in the community and society that I'm part of, that understanding of people who are lost, not lost in just the biblical sense, but lost in finding meaning and reality in their lives. And I want us to start to think about that, because it talks about this in terms of the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus has been out doing his tough day's work healing people, because that's what he did. And he goes away to seek a quiet place. But that isn't the way for Jesus. Often when Jesus goes to find a quiet place, the multitude have gathered, seeking for some meaning. Maybe they've heard about him. Maybe they've seen him and they want to understand, who is this person Jesus? A theme that's quite familiar in the Gospel of Mark. In fact, leading up even to another couple of chapters down the track, where Peter is questioned, who do you say I am? They are seeking to understand this person Jesus. And we today find this person Jesus as a person who is moved with compassion. It's a really interesting word. I won't actually tell you the Greek word. Did you study Greek? Do they make you study Greek anymore at college?
Yep.
They do for you? Oh, never mind. It's tough. It really is. It's a really interesting language, but it's non-used, the biblical Greek. It's not a common language. And the word actually here that talks about compassion actually says in the Greek, it actually means having your guts ripped apart. You see, because the ancients didn't believe that what happened in your heart. They believed it happened here, in your guts. Now, even today we have that sort of, I get a gut feeling about this. Yeah, you heard that expression? Oh, I can feel it in your guts. Australians are very good at saying that sort of thing. But in the original Greek text, it implies that Jesus saw the people and his guts were split apart because he was just so moved by their plight. It seems a little indifferent nowadays, doesn't it? I wonder how much the church, not us, but the church, feels the compassion when it sees lost people. Too often we are too busy shuffling around the deck chairs on the Titanic rather than worried about really what worries people down in their soul. We are not moved with compassion. We are moved to indifference. I don't think that's so amongst us. I think there is a sense that we do care about what is happening around us and to us. And today, as I went down to the snow festival, I thought what a safe festival snow festival must be. It doesn't really ask much of you, does it? It doesn't ask you to believe anything. It doesn't ask you to commit to anything. It's just somewhere to be. And we live in a time that seems to be really about a lot more pleasure than actually working through it with one another. You know, we don't see ads about talking, other than the World Vision ads and the like. We talk about actually giving of ourselves to other people. It's mainly about what we can get. And I wonder about it. We seem to be going on an interesting trajectory, an interesting movement in this world that we live in. That's really trying to find some meaning, but finding it in all of the wrong things. Trying to find it in material possessions, or trying to find the latest type of fad that comes along, whatever it may be, and trying to find meaning in that. You know, I read this morning, Oprah's coming back, and it talked of Oprah as the second coming to Australia, and I thought, how pathetic. How pathetic. You know, I'm sure Oprah is a good woman and does some nice things, but let's face it. You know, I've watched a lot of Oprah in times when I would be at home. She ain't that good. And yet we live in a really strange world. And I want to use a couple of examples. The first example was that I think we have become detached from the world that we live in. And you can see that by the life that we live in front of screens, whether they be computer screens, whether they be iPads like I do, or mobile phones. We live this detached life where it's just there on the pad. But that wasn't so for those who have gone before us. In fact, many of us would have experienced a world where we actually had hands-on. This was first occurred to me when I was working in Los Angeles with a friend of mine, a man called Ched, who is a biblical scholar, but is also a social activist. And he was doing some work in a place called Santa Barbara, which is just up the road, a little way. You might know it, George. It's just up the road a little bit from Los Angeles. And it's the playground a little bit of the rich. It's where the rich have their nice homes. Just out of Los Angeles, because you don't want to have nice homes in Los Angeles. Because if you've been there, it's like Richmond on a sunny Sunday afternoon. It really isn't a great place. But in this, there is one farmer that kept a block of land. And around all of these rich mansions is this block of land, a few acres, that's just been left fallow. And I was talking to him about it, and he said, well, it came when this guy started to do some Sunday school, not Sunday school, teaching in classes, religious values. And he started to talk about the food we eat. And he said to them, where does the milk come from? Where did the meat we eat come from? And they gave typical answers, because they were very urbanised. And they said, from the supermarket. And he realised that we have become detached from where our food comes from and the realities of our world. I would posit the fact that we are becoming, as a society, more and more detached from the realities of our worlds. You know, in fact, a lot of us, the only interface we have is that computer screen or that iPad screen. Some of the realities of this world seem to be far from the way we live them. You know, it will be interesting. We were able to live without screens and telephones and smartphones and all of that, but I don't know if we could still do it. And I was thinking about this in light of a friend of mine called Animal. You might have met Animal. Animal's my best friend. He's a motorcyclist, and Animal, I think, stopped understanding life in 1970s. So it's no good giving Animal a mobile phone. He doesn't know what to do with it. And he's an old school bike mechanic. And I love that because there is something, even with our automotives, we've lost something. My car is so computerised. I've got a relatively new car. And I have to take it in and they plug it in and they put it on what's called a scanalyzer. And the scanalyzer tells them what's wrong with the car. I don't know, did your car need a scanalyzer the other day? No. You know, it's a far cry from the days when I first started. And my father used to carry a hammer in his car. And every time the car would break down, he'd get out and bang it with a hammer, and magic, it'd work again. But, you know, I was told, this is really interesting, that nowadays, if you are in Europe, the top level Mercedes-Benz, they have computers in it, and the computer speaks to a computer at the head office at Mercedes-Benz, and they will send you an email when you are running low on oil. Talk about being detached. You know, in my day, you actually had you used a thing called a dipstick. And you put the dipstick in and you could tell how much oil was there. And then I found out that, they have lights. That's what came next. The light would tell you that you were running low on oil. Do you know what they call those lights in the industry? I'm not going to look at Sir Messi because he always has calculators for this, but they call them idiot lights. Because, if you didn't check your oil, you were being an idiot, and you had to have this light to tell you to do this. What idiots we must have become when we have to have an email now to tell us to check the oil on our car. I think that is a perfect example of how detached from real living that we have. And I think of my friend Animal, who works on old-fashioned motorbikes especially, he can tell whether a carb is running lean or whether it's running rich by the sound of it. There is a sense of, you didn't have to just go to a manual to work it out, but there was something intuitive of knowing whether it was working or whether it's not. And that could be true for not just motorbikes, but for many things in life. When my friend Michael started working in Telstra, they used to have it like an older man who would work with a younger, new technician and would teach them the tricks of the trade. It's a bit like a word called discipleship, where you follow around someone who teaches you what really is happening. Because not everything we learn can be in manuals, isn't that true? Anyone here a cook? Some cooks here? No cooks. Yes, there are. I know well and truly there are people who cook here. But there are some people who live purely by doing it from the recipe. But there are other people, and sometimes older school people, who've had recipes passed down through the generations. And there's a little bit of knowledge of knowing if it's right or if it isn't, just by the feel of it and the taste of it. And you know what's missing. True? Yeah. We've gone a long way from that world. And in terms of faith, we have moved a million miles away from it. I look at television sometimes, and early in the mornings, late at night, you get some of these religious programs. And they all look great. They've got the big auditoriums, they've got all of the lights and everything, but somehow the ingredients isn't quite right. Because faith isn't about hundreds and thousands. It's actually about living it and being there and doing it as small groups of, dare I say, disciples. And Mark's Gospel is very hot on this, the sense of, we do it not by just reading the book, but we do it by intuitive. We do it by having those people who've gone before us and teaching us how to do this stuff. We're losing that in church. That sense of old and young working together. It really is moving away. Why? Well, where are the young people? It's sad, We have kids who come along, but then they get to their teens and they're off and gone. Yeah? Now, I can't say that I blame them, because often what they see in church is a poor substitute, isn't it, for life? And how can we compete at all with the entertainment industry? Some bloke who stands up for 20 minutes is not going to compete with the richness that they can get by merely turning on their telly. But what we can is give them something that's real and authentic and deep. And yet, I wonder if we are touched by the compassion of Jesus within our lives, or whether it's just going through the motions. The danger is that we just go through the motions in all that we do, rather than feel it deeply and understand it deeply. I know that we live in a pretty broken world, a pretty messed up world. In fact, that's what I used to preach. I'd start this sermon by preaching that we live in a broken world. And George Bush, the original George Bush, not the recent one, but the previous one, was asked once about the state of his nation, America. I was actually in America at the time, and he said of America, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And as I walked around the streets and saw the homelessness, I saw the gap between rich and poor, as I saw Latinos who were treated like dirt and black people who were treated like dirt. simply for the fact that it was a society that was totally segregated in certain areas. True, George? And I just looked and I thought to myself, if that's not broken, what is? You know, where capitalism is rampant and king. You know, it's just get on, get over one another. And yet somehow this man couldn't see. I give the proposition to you today that we live in a broken world, that people are searching for some meaning and some depth in life. And yet, where's the church? The church is struggling to hold on to its small foothold that it has and keep itself going and make sure the budgets are met, rather than seeing and being moved with compassion and changing. What does that mean for you and I here today? I don't know. It's for you to sort it out, to go away and to think about it. And if I can do one thing in my sermons, and out of 20 minutes I hope that this sort of comes through, I want you to just go away and think about one thing. And today, the thing I want you to think about is the compassion of Jesus for this world and the brokenness of the world that we live in. My friends, I'm not going to say that Jesus is the answer. It's too easy. I can recall going to Canberra in 1972, and we were going to go and hold hands and pray around the old Parliament House, because I was very zealous in those sort of days, and we busloads. It was called Kairos, which was another Greek word which means the moment or the time. And we went to this Kairos event where we were going to stay, and we stopped at a place just outside, I think it was called Yass, just outside of Canberra. And we stopped there, and a few of us were so zealous we wanted a witness to the people. And I can remember a man standing there in tears, and one of the young girls went up to him and said, "Jesus loves you," which was a lovely thing to say. But as the conversation started to unfold, he started to tell her that week he'd lost his 2 twin children who'd died. And she said, "But don't you see Jesus loves you?" And he said, "But I can't get over the brokenness that I feel, the sadness that I feel about my children dying." But Jesus loves you. They want to hear more than Jesus loves them. They want to see Jesus loves them. Because to say it is just words, but to live it is meaning. And if we are truly moved with compassion, we are moved beyond words. And my friends, today here, as I said, I'm not going to tell you that Jesus is the answer. But if I'm going to follow someone, I want to follow someone who is moved with compassion for people who are broken and lost. And the good news in the story of today is that the Jesus that we follow is a Jesus moved with compassion for a world that is broken. But not just a world of 2,000 years ago, but a world of today. Take these things, hold them in your hearts, and think of them. Now,